Welcome, everyone, and hello to this very special edition of Romola D Reports. I'm here this evening with Dr. Helen Tsigounis from Melbourne, Australia, and she's here to tell us an extraordinary story of targeting, blacklisting, and sabotage of her medical career and medical profession. And she's going to start from way back, going right back to medical school and taking us through all sorts of travails after medical school and her experiences both in Australia and in Greece, since she's of Greek heritage. So welcome, Helen.
Welcome. Hi, Romola. How are you?
Very good, thank you. That is such a gorgeous picture behind you, and I understand you painted that picture, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I've been doing a lot of painting lately. It's a way that I can actually deal with a lot of stress as well. And so I've become a painter. I haven't had any formal training at all. So I'm learning as I go along. Every time I do a painting, it's better than the one before. I'm nowhere near as good as I should, as a formal painter is. But I try and I enjoy it. It's a hobby at the moment.
Helen, that is a gorgeous painting. I have to tell you, I paint myself. I've been painting for years. I've taken classes over time, etc. But if for somebody who's had no training to be painting in that style and in that fashion and with such a great understanding of color and composition, goodness, you appear to be massively talented from my point of view, from where I'm looking at it.
One of the better ones I've done. Some of them have not worked out at all. So, as I said, it's just a hobby at the moment that I've got into and that I really enjoy. I find it very relaxing, and it's really helped me a lot psychologically to actually have a hobby like that, to release all the stress that my life has had over over 25 years, basically.
Sure. Absolutely. As you know, Helen, I'm still reading your book. I should say that Helen is the author of a book, The Redback Web, and she published this book 10 years ago in 2008, I understand. Oh, there's the book.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There's the book.
That's a hard copy. Because all my hard copies have actually been stolen from my house.
Oh dear.
Over and over again, and it happened in Greece and here. They have raided my house and stolen my books. This is one that I found that was hidden in a drawer. So this is the book. I'm not selling the book, but anyone that is interested in obtaining the book as a free PDF version, it's available online. So, yeah.
That's brilliant. Yes, I know.
Anyone can read it, basically, and it's there for everyone to read.
You have the book now as a free download online, right? As a free ebook or PDF online?
Yes, I think it's a book that is very much relevant to public issues that are arising in today's society, and I think it is in the public interest as well. So it's out there for free. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. And I should make mention of the fact that this is one of the most extraordinarily detailed, meticulously detailed accounts that I have read of someone's experience, both in medical school, with events that occurred in medical school and later during your internship. And, events that connected with doctors at the university that you went to medical school for, Monash University in Victoria, and then later on your internship in Townsville.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. It's a detailed account of all these, of my targeting since 1994. I was blacklisted.
Yeah, perhaps we can start right there. Did you want to talk a little bit about those early experiences in medical school?
I'd like to talk about medical school, and I will start there. But I think before I start, I just want to tell people what I have discovered through a very long process of being targeted since 1994, and what I have discovered about the system whilst I've fought it all this time and still fighting it for justice. What I have discovered is that the medical school was actually controlled by New World Order agents. Now, some of them were high-degree Freemasons, others were part of the Illuminati satanic cult, also known as the Otto, which is registered in Australia as a satanic cult. It appears that these groups have actually infiltrated all areas of society, of the system in Australia. Medicine, the law, the media, the government, the intelligence agencies. It appears that this network actually is the deep state. When I say that, obviously other elements to the deep state exist as well, but these people actually control, they're on the highest echelons of power, controlling the deep state. So we've got a network that is actually controlling all aspects of society in Australia. So, what they do and how they behave, is not my thing to say, except to say there's a lot of literature out there describing a lot of these behaviours and actions from these secret societies. So I think medicine, like the rest of the system, in particular the law and the judges, were actually controlled by a network of these people. The sub-dean of medicine was a high-degree Freemason, allegedly Satanist, and allegedly part of a VIP pedophile. Now, I don't want to mention his name, but this particular person was actually the New World Order watchdog at the university, at Monash University in Victoria, Melbourne, medical school. So it appears that his role was to sift out, certain people from the system that were not going to be loyal robots of the New World Order.
And you ran up against this as a student. Now, everything that you have said right now is probably sort of ringing bells for various people watching, because at this point in time, everybody knows about this sort of insertion or interference at the very highest levels in our society by these occultists and Satanists and Freemasons and Illuminati.
That's right.
Who
I want to go into
power.
That's right. Yes, I don't want to go into that too much, but except to say that I became aware that this is the structure of the Australian system at the moment. And one of the reasons where I have been blocked from obtaining my human rights to the law and justice as well is because this powerful network is as powerful as it is. And another reason is that the mainstream media, instead of reporting truth about my case, actually reported the lies and aided in the process of persecuting me further and humiliating me and just reporting lies on the case, on the court case, despite the fact that I had given them the correct information beforehand. So that goes to say that they had criminally conspired as well with the rest of them to actually persecute, destroy, humiliate, destroy my identity, my human rights to earn a living, my human rights to the law and justice, and my human rights to actually live a normal life.
Yes.
So they wanted to actually annihilate me. So it all started in medical school, where in fourth year medicine, I was at the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne, which is a Monash University teaching hospital.
Okay.
And I came across this particular sub-dean. He had a long history of actually blacklisting a lot of doctors. So we all feared him in a way, because we knew that getting on the wrong side of this person meant destruction of your career. So who was this person? Why did he have so much power in the system? Well, he was part of these networks and a very loyal New World Order type of watchdog at the medical school. Now, what sort of students did he blacklist? Well, he blacklisted, at the time we thought it was a racial discrimination issue, and I had a lawyer working on the case as well, and he thought it was a racial discrimination issue where he was targeting minorities, people of Greek origin, people of Italian origin, people that were Indian, people that were not Anglo-Saxon or Jewish. Now, of course, he couldn't, he had a particular type of person that he was actually targeting as well. So it wasn't just a racial thing, it was a character thing as well. He tended to target people that were free thinkers, that could not be controlled, that were more ethical and empathic in their ways, people that had a very good ethical framework, that could not be destroyed, people that were resistant to a Luciferian type of mentality that was perpetrated through the medical school.
Mm-hmm.
So that comes to mind that they're actually, conclusion that they're actually sifting out people from the system that do not fit into their satanic New World Order. So that became clear with time that that was the motive behind it. There were a number of other students involved. Most of them that were blacklisted actually have left Australia at this point in time. Some of them are in the United States, some of them are in Europe. So, they are absolutely destroyed in America. And I have always wondered, who on earth is this one person? And who is he being able to turn a whole system against you?
What exactly happened actually in medical school? What did this sub-dean actually do to you and to the other students? How exactly did he blacklist you?
Yes, there was a lot of bullying.
Okay.
There was a lot of harassment, just all these degenerate behaviours that, a person of that standing, you're just in shock that they were able to behave in such degenerate ways, just a lot of bullying, a lot of, as I said, harassment. I'll give you an example of two instances. One instance was there was a Jewish boy who was, very into furthering his career in my year, and we were in a group together. This Jewish boy was very friends with this sub-dean. He would come up to me and state, "Stop studying, because no matter how much you study, you're going to, this person's going to fail you. So there's no point."
Goodness.
Another instance was when I was doing a ward round with him, me and this Jewish boy, we were in the group together. There was a sign between him and the consultant, and he actually left the ward. He suddenly left the ward round. And I knew he was told he was up to something, because it was, it was very obvious from the looks. And so about a minute later, I decided to leave the ward round and follow him. And what I found is he was going through my bag, which was on the ward, with all my notes, and ripping them up and put them in the bin. Now, the funny thing is that this particular person actually ended up topping the year afterwards. So there was a particular...
Sort of open sabotage. He was actually ripping up your notes and throwing them away?
They were harassing me in ways like that, which is not unusual. Yeah, they were harassing me in ways like that, just to try and psychologically disturb me. Just before exams, this sub-dean was basically, trying to emotionally destabilize me just before my exams by a lot of bullying and harassment. Just a lot of little minor things that, are kind of like really important at the time, but looking back now, if I describe them, they're not that important, but at the time they were.
Sure.
Another instance, during that year, I also, I had a little dog, a little Pomeranian, and she had epilepsy, and I was very attached to her. I used to study with her next to me. She was just company for me all the time. And they knew I loved animals, and I was very attached to my dog. And, for some reason, there was a girl in my year, which I don't remember her name, but I think she's mentioned in my book. She lived at the back of my house. Her house and my house had a fence that separated the backyards. Okay. Now, my dog would not disappear at all from the house. I mean, it was airtight. She could not disappear. But my dog disappeared from my house during that time, and we looked everywhere for her, and put her on the radios and the neighborhoods, and just disappeared into thin air. And that actually disturbed me quite a bit. I was very attached to her, and we found out that part of the fence had been broken at the back. Oh, wow. And so the only way this dog could have disappeared was someone having fiddled with the fence.
Or broken the fence.
So I've got a feeling that was part of these satanic sort of things that they do.
I'm so sorry.
Looking back.
That is so frightful.
At the time, I had no idea, but looking back, yes, that's what it was. And this girl as well, it's another indicator of she being used in that way, was that she actually got almost topped the year as well. So, these two people who were by far not the best students were using these other
with you.
Yeah, we're using these, we're being used by this particular person to actually, participate in a type of kind of harassment to satisfy his personal psychopathic, from what I understand, focus and obsession with destroying me. So yeah, things like that happened at medical school. Now, another important point about medical school is he was failing me. He had failed me when I thought I had passed my exams. So I repeated the year, and then he failed me again. This is after I had very positive feedback from all my examiners that I had performed very well. So I went up to him and I said, I want to see my papers to find out what I did wrong, why I failed again. He said, certainly not. So I got a lawyer at the time, a friend of my father's, who was an Indian lawyer, and he sent off a freedom of information request to the medical school, demanding that we see our papers. Now, 2 months later, they had 2 months to do this, so on the last day they revealed my papers and we looked at them and they were all very good. I had almost got 100% in a lot of things that were just totally crossed out by this big cross.
Oh, wow.
So the examiners would give you like 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, and then someone had overrided that.
Oh my
and
goodness.
crossed it out.
This
I
is
also just,
incredible. It's so overt. It's like you.
Yes, I think most doctors know that this goes on, but they're too scared to speak. They don't rock the boat. There's a lot of people that are aware of this blacklisting system. I think most people in the department are, and it has been discussed as well by by a particular professor. It was discussed that a friend of mine who was on the blacklist, he was also of Greek origin, had performed very well in his psychiatric exam and ended up getting a borderline pass. And he stood up and said, well, I want to see my papers. Something's gone wrong here. And he was blatantly told that he was on the blacklist. That's why. So they were downgrading certain people and upgrading others. And so we presented this information to the Dean of Medicine, stating how could she have failed when she had performed so well.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to admit that it was a mistake in the end.
Oh.
And he said, well, maybe it's a bit of her attitude that's the problem. And well, you know what, if you do anything against the department, you will never get your degree. We will all stick together and you will never get your degree. So my advice to you is put your head down, repeat the year again, and just, be quiet and just get through. And I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. And literally, it didn't happen. I mean, well, it did in a sense that, my marks were totally downgraded and, I wasn't going to go through the process of proving it again. So what happened is I proved that this man was fiddling with the exams of people, promoting the ones that he wanted,
mm-hmm.
and just, destroying the ones that he didn't. So, I think this network got very, very scared, the fact that I had evidence to actually prove that. And once I graduated from medical school, they became even more vicious towards destroying me, and they were decided to actually destroy me through their control of the hospitals, the teaching hospitals. So I did my internship in 1998. I got very good marks, but from all, I did 10 months. I was in my 10th month, mm-hmm. working, 18-hour days, up to 18 days straight. They actually had me working on wards where I had something like 100 patients, where other students had like 5 patients. So they put me into the worst part of the internship, program, to try and actually find out, to try and get some sort of, try and push me into some sort of mistake so they can use against me. Now, 10 months later, I was approached by the administrator of the hospital, Dr. Eleanor Flynn, who is, I talk about the male Freemasons, but there are also female Freemasons that are part of these satanic cults. So that's all I want to say about that. But she decided she wanted to see me because she was very concerned about my performance, and that I had written on a timesheet to have a day off after I had gastroenteritis. I had written sick instead of sick leave, and she thought that was a major area of concern. that was the issue against me. So I got a lawyer. I had no idea. So I got the same lawyer, and we presented in a meeting, and so she kept having meetings with me to actually come out with these little really irrelevant things as areas of concern. This is in an environment where other interns were actually killing patients based on poor knowledge and negligence, and nothing was ever done. So during my internship, I knew they were after me, so I was photocopying everything I did. Every medical note that I had actually written, I had photocopied, because the administrator had this other young girl that was an intern, and I mentioned her in my book. And once again, she ended up doing very well in medicine. She was going around ripping notes from the medical records that I was actually writing. And, you know, this is an attempt for them to state that I hadn't seen the patient when I had. So once again, she was promoted very well, and you know, through medicine with her degenerate behaviour. This is one thing that I need to point out, that the bizarre thing about the system is the medical school was promoting degenerate type of behaviours, you know, like these sort of really bad, you know, degenerate acts of people, and rewarding that sort of behaviour, whereas punishing good behaviour, which is almost the reverse of what most people think. You know, you're usually punished for a good behaviour, and you
Yes,
know,
really,
so,
the total inversion.
so the reverse was happening. Another thing I had to mention about medical school is that I had a car accident that year as well, during the 1994 blacklisting, where my brakes snapped. And I nearly died in the car accident. I've got, like, you know, huge scars here on my forehead. And I don't know, I can't link, I mean, it could have been linked, but I'm not sure. But, you know, not knowing these people now, retrospectively, I mean, they are capable of very degenerate acts, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So, so on my 10th month of doing an internship, I was told, the administrator came up to me and she grabbed my pager after I did a night shift, so I was quite tired. And mind you, they waited after I actually worked 18 hours and 18 days straight before she did this. So I did all the work, you know. And then she grabbed my pager and she said, "You're suspended." Didn't give me a reason or anything. So once again, I get a lawyer, you know, I get lawyers actually this time. Yeah, and we're trying to find out.
Without a reason? You said you were suspended.
Without a reason. And, you know, my lawyers were trying to find, you know, some sort of reason. What is the complaint against her? My lawyer at the time realised that it was, you know, it was an attempt to actually destroy me, and God knows what they were relying on. So 2 months later, I get a letter from the medical board that the matter was referred to the medical board. The medical board said, "Look, you know, Dr. Eleanor Flynn said you had lack of insight. And so, you know, we want you to go through a psychiatric assessment with our psychiatrist." Now, my lawyer was very smart, and he said to me, they're trying to get you through psychiatry now. They couldn't find a complaint. You know, they witch hunted me all that year and couldn't find an error, you know. And so they've decided to attack me psychiatrically. So what we did, we went and saw independent psychiatrists behind the medical board's back to assess me from top to toe. You know, so I saw them a number of times, and I just said, assess me from top to toe, assess my insight, my judgment, my personality, my psychiatric, you know, supposed whatever, you know, if I have it. I said, just assess me. So the medical board was unaware that I had got these 3 psychiatrists, you know, reports, which stated that I had a high level of insight, that I was intelligent, and that I was being persecuted. That was supported by all my intern assessments from the whole 10 months of my superiors, who had to actually report on my insight and judgment and competence and everything, and they were all assessed me very well. So I went to see the psychiatrist from the board, who said, "You've got lack of insight, and I'm putting psychiatric conditions on your registration." So I was actually told to sign that I had lack of insight to agree with the board. I mean, how ridiculous is that? If I had lack of insight, I wouldn't know I had lack of insight, would I? So I was actually bullied by the medical board to actually sign a paper stating that I agree that I had lack of insight. And the medical board said, we will not find you a placement to complete your internship, the last 2 months of my internship, if you do not sign this paper. So my lawyer said, well, just sign it. So I signed it. And in the end, the medical board lied as well. They had blacklisted me to every hospital and no one would take me as a doctor to complete the 2 months. So yes, so that was the early on experience, which is described in chapter 2 of my book and chapter 3 of my book. That was Frankston Hospital in 1998. I was blacklisted. I went to Greece and I sat reciprocity exams there to actually get my license in Greece because I had lost faith in Australia. During that time, I had worked in Greece in anaesthetics, and I decided to come back in 2002 because I really wanted to live in Melbourne where my family was. Mm-hmm. And I was offered a job by the Townsville Hospital in Queensland, where the director of clinical training, Dr. Barry Hodges, basically said to me, I'm aware of your situation. The boys' club will not reach you up here. So he had reassured me that he was going to protect me against this network. So I started working at the Townsville Hospital. I registered with the Medical Board of Queensland. Now, Queensland said, because you've got psychiatric conditions on your registration previously, we want you to see our psychiatrist before you're employed. So I saw a psychiatrist, which is mentioned in my book, chapter 3. She saw me for about 10 minutes. Now, I was advised by a psychiatrist called Jean Linane, who is head of the Whistleblower Association in Australia, to actually take in a tape recorder to the meeting, because she said, in situations like this, psychiatrists make things up. Now, I felt a little bit odd in taking a tape recorder in, and I thought that'll just feed the paranoia bit. So I thought I'll take my chances and just go and see her without a tape recorder. So she saw me for a little bit, wrote a report that I had paranoid personality, and then literally fraudulently made things up on the report that were never said. So Jean Linane was right. I should have taken in a tape recorder. So the Medical Board of Queensland put in a myriad of psychiatric conditions on my registration, which made my life very difficult. Seeing a psychiatrist once a week, their psychiatrist, seeing a GP once a week, reporting, getting all my supervisors to report on me psychiatrically every week, all these things that made your life, humiliated you, mm-hmm. degraded you, and basically made your life very difficult. But I went along with it. I was told to go along with it, So during my 1.5 years in Townsville Hospital, I also did one very clever thing, is I had a friend in Sydney who was a lawyer. So every time I had some time off, I would go and visit her in Sydney, and I would also see a number of psychiatrists to assess my personality. So they were assessing me over a 1-year period, 1.5-year period, because I wanted independent medical reports. And I told them in particular, assess me for paranoid personality, because that's what the board claims. Now, I got all these reports at the end, and I sent them to the medical board so I can prove that, I don't have a paranoid personality and I don't have to have conditions on my registration. So I made an application at the end of a 1.5 years of working at the Townsville Hospital. I made applications to have these psychiatric conditions removed based on these reports that stated, one psychiatrist, Dr. Ouzos, said, absolute nonsense. You have no criteria based on the DSM diagnosis that could state that you were paranoid on any level. So the medical board didn't like that, and so my application was not going through, and I needed this new registration so I could work freely outside the hospital system. So my application was not going through, and so I resigned from the Townsville Hospital, went back to Melbourne to pursue it legally again. Now, I had in my favour, all my supervisors wrote brilliant reports. The director, Dr. Hodges of clinical training, wrote a brilliant report on me, stated there were absolutely no issues. the medical board totally ignored all the facts and all the reports. And instead, they said, we're banning you from the profession. So Dr. Karen Yen from the Medical Board of Queensland came out with a report after a 2-day investigation on my performance after I left the hospital. She came out with a with 2 false complaints, and she signed this document. She stated that I sent a patient home with acute bacterial meningitis. You know, I did a lumbar puncture on the patient. The results came back with acute bacterial meningitis, and I'd sent them home.
And didn't all
without
this
identifying it.
Very
At Townsville.
much later? Didn't this happen about 9 months after you had left the hospital?
Yeah. Well, the medical board had 2 months to make a decision based on my application. They issued me with a notice stating this is the complaint against you, and it's a serious one. They also said that I tried to do a vaginal investigation and instead put the speculum or the swab into the wrong hole. So they were the 2 complaints without identifying any patient. Now, you know, you've got to understand that the perversion of these people would quite, you know, explains the nature of the complaint.
Sounds like it.
That I got it in the wrong hole, basically. So
they had to fixate on something like that or come up with something like that, right?
No, we're talking about perverted individuals that are part of these networks.
Yeah.
So I basically replied that, you know, it's false. I want the patient's medical records to find out who the patient was, and they were refusing to give me the medical records. A year later, they still had not made up their mind. So during that 1-year process, they realized they didn't have enough information against me. They didn't have enough. So what they did is the medical board used taxpayers' money to employ the most powerful QCs in Queensland to witch hunt me during a 1-year period after I left the hospital. To witch hunt me. They even interviewed cleaners about, you know, do you have anything against it? So they went through everyone, whether I worked with them or not. And some doctors that I knew said, oh my God, they're coming to the hospital, you know, 6 months after I'd left, interviewing everyone, nurses, getting them to go through everything, looking for any complaints. So they came forth with certain added complaints a year after I left the hospital. For example, one nurse said, when I wrote an order down of anginine S/L, which means sublingual, my L looked like a C. Now that was grounds to bar me from the profession. And that was the type of complaint the medical board used against me.
So extraordinary. I mean, considering the fact that doctors usually don't know how to even sign their names.
Well, I mean, that's just ridiculous. You know,
right? I know, stereotype.
Yeah. So we identified the meningitis patient by subpoenaing the records. Basically, there was no meningitis. The medical board had made the whole thing up. They had falsified the documents, the reports, the results of tests, created a scenario that was totally out of touch with the medical notes and reality. Then they had to support what they started this with a lie, so they had to try and create a lie from the truth, you know. So what they did, they used the method of repetition. So they got a number of doctors from the hospital who were, you know, largely part of these Freemasonic networks. And one doctor that I'd never seen or worked with, to write affidavits stating detailed false evidence about what I did with about this patient, this meningitis patient. Now, they went through so much detail, like, you know, she basically, she did a lumbar puncture. The results came back proving acute bacterial meningitis. She then sent the patient home. So details, which meant that they were familiar with the patient. Under cross-examination, none of these doctors had seen the patient. None of these doctors had read the medical notes, but over a 1-year period signed affidavits stating these things and gave evidence against me. So they tried to create a meningitis patient out of someone who just had a simple headache. And it was, the patient's name was Jared Young. He was suffering from migraines based on occupational. He worked in a mine. So that was his diagnosis, which was And he had presented many times to the hospital with the same headache. So, so they tried to create, they criminally conspired to perpetrate fraud in order to persecute and destroy my career. Now, the doctors involved in this are all named and were cross-examined at the district court hearing. Dr. David Cooksley, Dr. Neil Small, Dr. Mark Elcock, Dr. Julia Ashley. I think that was it. So all these doctors, without having seen the patient, read the medical notes, wrote detailed false information about me, about a supposedly acute bacterial meningitis patient when it didn't exist. And the medical notes have been subpoenaed, were before the court, actually copied in my book, and prove that they knew the truth all along because the medical records were there. And it takes a 1-minute process to actually get the medical records of a patient. So they all knew the truth, including Dr. Karen Yen from the medical board, and she basically criminally conspired to perpetrate fraud against me, which is a criminal offence. Now, okay, the other issue with and so the other patient, the vaginal anal mix-up.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually, that was the same doctors talking about signing affidavits in relation to that. When cross-examined, none of them had seen the patient. No patient was identified. Some doctors said they heard it was a swab. Some doctors heard it was a speculum. So they were inconsistent between each other. They all said they heard it from someone that they couldn't imagine, they couldn't remember. So this complaint was relied upon by the medical board to bar me from the profession. Where there was no patient, the people making the statements heard it from someone but couldn't remember who. They had signed affidavits in relation.
This is so horrifying. I mean, just to pause there for a minute, Helen, because it sounds like right from the beginning, there's been such a train of injustices and such an overt, pointed effort to literally witch hunt, as you say, to really focus
that's what they do.
On you, your work, and literally persecute you all through medical school and also through this internship.
Well, it has to do with the New World Order blacklist. If your name becomes, part of this list, you will be, hounded by these people. Now, I'm not the only one. As I said, there've been so many other people. Yes, I'm very
curious to find out about the others as well. You said there were a few in college as well during your medical university degree.
I think there have been other people, but usually they, they shrivel in the background. Some commit suicide by having their lives destroyed, being attacked and persecuted. It's a very difficult situation to go through, to give up your life, your identity, your human rights as a person. Very difficult. Now, another issue with my case is I had employed Mark Dreyfus QC, who is a
yes. So this enters the whole world of the legal side of it, right? Where you also faced injustice of horrendous proportions there.
Well, these New World Order blacklists are basically being blacklisted as a threat to the New World Order. Okay, so any Freemason in the system can actually place you on the blacklist. The New World Order is to do with the Zionists, Zionists, these Illuminati families that are trying to create a New World Order. They're mainly Jewish people, Zionist Jewish people, but not only. There's other people involved as well. And the Freemasonry they're robots. So they use the Freemasonry to actually carry out the crimes they want to create and also cover up their crimes. So, so I guess what I want to say is that the Freemasons are very involved in my case. So this was an issue with the system, not with just the medical profession. So then I employ one of the top lawyers in Melbourne, who is currently the Attorney General QC and who actually became the Attorney General after my case. He was named Mark Dreyfus. I also had a barrister, Jane Dixon, and also a Leonie Brassier lawyer. So I employed a whole legal team to actually get me some justice, and save my career as a doctor.
I think at that point we should also point out that you were literally fighting to be recognized as a doctor, because this had to do with your registration as a doctor, right? Your basic medical license.
the medical board decided to bar me indefinitely from the profession based on these issues.
Right.
There have been a number of people that are part of the Illuminati satanic cult that were involved, like one of the head psychiatrists that said that I had lack of insight. And there have also been a number of high-degree Freemasons involved in making the false complaints against me. So I go through the legal profession. I employ Mark Dreyfus for 9 months. The details of that in my book, Chapter 4, called The Dreyfus Legal Team. What I found was astonishing, shocked me to the core. My own solicitors were trying to cover up the administrative errors made by the medical board that would have won me the case. In reality, I had won the case before it even went to court based on the administrative errors and the legal errors as per the Medical Practitioner Registration Act, which the medical board is bound to follow. That's the law that the medical board has to follow. So the medical board does not have 1 year to consider an application while they witch hunt you. They have 2 months. Do you know what I mean? To make a decision after, you know, you reply back to them. So Mark Dreyfus was covering up the administrative errors made by the medical board. He was covering up the process. Secondly, he was basically getting rid of and burying all the evidence that was in my favour and trying to create a new reality around the case that was false. I had confronted him many times with written instructions. Now, I saw Mark Dreyfus once a week for 9 months, and after every meeting there was a memorandum. All these memorandums are actually published in my book, Chapter 4. Now, I confronted Mark Dreyfus and said, you are manipulating the case against me. He was refusing to mention Professor Robert Adler, who was the head of the medical board, and head child psychiatrist who actually started the psychiatric issue against me for lack of insight, Professor Robert Adler. He's mentioned in my book a number of times. And you know what I found with my research into this issue, I found that Professor Robert Adler is actually used many times in court cases to cover up satanic ritual abuse of patients. So he's the psychiatrist that is called by the government to cover up satanic ritual abuse cases. And one of the major cases in Victoria was the Santa Maria case that went through VCAT. And the details of that are in my book, Chapter 4. So yes, Mark Dreyfus was also a Zionist Jew, but I didn't think that was you know, important when I employed him. I thought, you know, so what? What if he is Jewish, Greek, Italian, you know, Muslim? I didn't really care, you know. I didn't think that it was an issue, but in retrospect, I think it was an issue. So just a week before the hearing, I said to Mark Dreyfus, you include the truth about what went on, you know, during the medical board's process and the administrative errors in the court case. And he said, I refuse to. With this judge, you will not get what you want. So he basically told me that the judge that got appointed, Judge Clive Wall, was not going to do what is legally correct. And he was not going to argue anything that the judge didn't want. So I said, you do this. You are my QC. You have been paid for 9 months, lots of money over, you know, the legal team had received, and you are to follow my instructions. And he refused. So another thing he was trying to do is he was trying to get expert witnesses to actually go through the medical notes of the patient and give an opinion, so expert opinion, of people that had nothing to do with me and my work or had never seen me before. So I said to him, I would like to have Professor Paddy Juan as a witness, as an expert witness, Dr. Papagelis, and Dr. And said these people can actually assess the evidence and give their expert opinion. Mark Dreyfus refused.
Oh,
Mark Dreyfus refused.
Can I interrupt you for just 1 second? Helen, I think just now your audio was kind of messed up a little bit.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, they're going to be fiddling around with this, you know, for
yeah,
sure.
I know, but we just lost one little sentence. I think the name of the person or somebody that you were alluding to just now. Not Mark.
Yes, Mark
Dreyfus, but the other person. So.
Boo.
Well, you'd wanted to have a special professor, right? Who had some knowledge
Right.
of the work.
Yes, I wanted to have Professor Paddy Duan, Doctor, and three expert witnesses that I was told were very good doctors and would give a very honest opinion. Mark Dreyfus denied me that. He said, I'm not doing it. He said, you're going to get Professor Rodney Judson from the Royal Melbourne. He just happened to be very affiliated with a high degree Mason himself, a Zionist Jew himself. And I said to Mark Dreyfus, I don't want him, because it was clear to me that he was very connected with the psychiatrists from the medical board, very close,
Wow.
who were both the same networks. I said, no, I don't want him. So Mark Dreyfus went off and got him, charged me $5,000 for the report. This is against my instructions. And of course, this person said, yes, there was a meningitis patient. Now, when I cross-examined this person in the courtroom, he had no idea whether the patient had a fever. He had not seen the medical reports.
Oh my
He
goodness.
was just told.
Yeah.
He was just told, write this down and get $20,000 for it, you know. And so so Mark Dreyfus said, no, I'm not doing it. I am not going to argue things that we had agreed on initially based on our contract, because this judge is not going to give you what you want. So I wrote a complaint against Mr. Mark Dreyfus. It's actually at the Victorian Bar Ethics Committee, which he was a part of. And I wrote, and it's copied in my book, it's filed with a number, all the different areas, all the different aspects to what I believe he breached his duty of care as a barrister were identified, proven in my chapter 4 of my book. And the Victorian Bar Ethics Committee said, Mark Dreyfus has ceased to be a member of this committee since your complaint, but we don't find any evidence of any of the things you say. And it was clear-cut evidence, of course. So I was left without a lawyer. So I find last minute an Italian lawyer called Prospero Francesi, who decided to take on my case. Now, one of these issues with being targeted is you cannot find lawyers. And if you do, the lawyers are actually approached by the intelligence agencies, and some of them are paid off to obstruct the case, others are coerced, but what they have to do is obstruct your case and pervert the course of justice. That is their job through and through. Now, I didn't know that at the time. So when I presented at court during the district court hearing, the judge said, no, I'm not allowing your lawyer to act for you. You will be doing the case yourself. I give you 3 minutes to prepare yourself. So I said to him, do I have a choice? No, I want to adjourn. I want to find another lawyer if you don't want this one, you know. He said, no, you are doing the case yourself. You do not have a choice. Get ready. So I had to conduct the case myself. Now, an important point about this, we all knew the judge was going to witch hunt for a negative finding. We all knew that. But I realized my role in the whole situation was to make it hard for the judge, to put in enough evidence in the courtroom that he just couldn't make a finding against me on any level, except if he was going to fabricate it, which means he was going to put himself at risk. So I actually conducted the case at the Supreme Court hearing. Now, one issue that I need to bring up was this judge was persecuting me from the start. You know, I think the fact that he forced me to do the case myself is an example of that.
Yes, that's huge. Now, I mean, that in itself, that is so extraordinary that literally, I mean, here you are, a medical student, all of a sudden being asked to conduct your own case, literally on the spot. Right. You were put on the spot.
That's right, Romola. It was just incredible. I was crying in front of the judge. No, I don't want to do this. You know, and he was just, he didn't call me doctor for the whole time. Miss Tsigounis, get yourself together and start cross-examining. Yes, that's the sort of behaviour I got from the judge.
Oh my God.
Now, it was a Monday, and, you know, I had cross-examined patients all day. In the evening, I was reading up on the law and trying to find out which witnesses are for the following day in order to prepare myself. What the medical board was doing was switching witnesses. So by the end of Monday, it was a
yes, I read about that in your book, Outrageous. They kept switching witnesses on you.
That's right. They kept switching witnesses, so I wasn't prepared.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I conducted the hearing. On the 4th day, on the Thursday, I hadn't slept for 4 nights. I was living on coffee, literally, and Red Bulls to try and, you know, save myself. It was
Yeah.
just a survival thing to save my career. And I said to I walked into the courtroom Thursday morning at 8 a.m. and I had photocopied some articles based on the fact if you do not sleep for 24 hours, your blood alcohol level is 0.05. If you haven't slept for 4 days, well, you're basically drunk, you know, in a drunken state. I had trouble picking up a paper. My motor skills weren't functioning. I was slurring my words. So I said to the judge, Your Honour, you have forced me into a position where I have to sort of, you know, conduct the case myself. I have not slept for 4 days. I've had no legal help from anyone. I'm reading up on the law and the witnesses every night, preparing myself. I have not slept for 4 days. I'm finding difficulty speaking and picking up a pen. Could I please adjourn the case for a day so I can sleep? And I handed in the article, which is an exhibit before the court case. So it's made it in the evidence. He said, no, Miss Tsigounis, continue on.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Totally
So
hopeless.
Well, I mean, you know, yes. So, you know, what can I say?
Yeah,
I was in shock. So I mean, I was beyond shock with this judge, beyond shock. I mean, I reached a point where I expected any bizarre, unlawful, unjudicial behaviour by this judge. You know, I was expecting it
completely inhumane. It sounds like, you know.
So yes, and so you know, I actually conducted the whole case myself. And another an example of lawyer corruption that I need to point out just quickly is one of the lawyers that I employed, Philip Leach. He was actually trying to acid strip me, and the whole point of the legal and judicial process in a case like this is to acid strip the person.
It certainly sounds like it.
I've spent over $1 million in legal fees, and in the end, I had to represent myself. So, you know, where did all this money go? An example of what happened, Philip Leach sent me a tax invoice stating, based on my instructions, that he subpoenaed Dr. Karen Yan from the medical board, who made up these false accusations about the meningitis patient. She was the key witness. She's the one that basically prevented my registration from happening based on her report. So I said, now Mark Dreyfus was refusing to subpoena her. So this lawyer, I mean, they were told not to subpoena her because she was freaking out. She was freaking out.
Because she made up the whole story and she put it in a report and signed her name to it.
That's right. So what Philip Leach did, he wrote a tax invoice, which is copied in my book, stating that I have sent subpoenas for her. But I checked the court documents and subpoenas were not sent. And he charged me $10,000 for this.
Oh my God.
So he had to do it. So, you know what, all along I have made complaints with black and white proof of legal solicitors' corruption to the Law Society in Australia, and nothing has happened. They have written back stating no evidence to support your claims when there is clear-cut evidence. So that's the level of corruption that has occurred.
Yeah.
So
that is extreme.
So yes, I conducted the case myself, and I began to actually pick up on things, and I did it actually very well. It was a 3-week process, and this is the transcripts. Another thing the lawyers were trying to do is get rid of all the documents. That's another thing they were told to do. So every time I gave them documents, my own lawyers would just totally make them disappear.
Oh my gosh.
So what they wanted to do is get rid of all the evidence that was in the court case, all the evidence of the district court. Because they had failed. They had failed because I was able to conduct the case myself. They didn't expect that. So, you know, the transcripts are there for everyone to see. I conducted the case and did very well, actually.
Yes, I can attest to that, having read a bit of your transcripts. I mean, it was actually very interesting reading the transcripts and seeing how very intensively you kind of rebutted their very odd responses to you.
Yes, yes. All the evidence of the court hearing, the district court hearing, which was basically D1136. So anyone can get the transcripts. The transcripts are basically, you know, copied in my book. because I had to actually write a book about it because they were trying to get rid of all the information of what went on in the courtroom to cover themselves up. So yes, the end of the district court hearing, I employ another prominent QC, Tony Morris, to conduct the case. To some degree, he created a document for the Supreme Court appeal stating that the primary judge was biased. The primary judge failed to adhere to appropriate standard of proof, being the Brigachaw standard. The primary judge conducted an unfair trial, and a lot of other errors of law. Now, it is the function of the Supreme Court to correct errors of law that have occurred by a previous district court judge.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a 2-day hearing at the Supreme Court of Brisbane with Tony Morris. After the first day, I realised that my own solicitor once again was covering up the evidence of proving fraud by the medical board and criminal conspiracy to commit fraud. So that issue they did not want to actually, be before a court, or to actually highlight these issues, because then it becomes a criminal matter. They didn't want that. And the other thing is, the Supreme Court judges, all being Freemasons from what I've been told, were basically stating, well, she just got rid of Mark Dreyfus. And that is, they actually had the complaint before them that was at the Victorian Bar Ethics Committee. And one of the issues was that he withdrew from the case a week before the hearing, despite having had $10,000 deposit for the actual hearing, and despite having a 9-month employment with him to conduct the case. So he withdrew. That was part of my complaint. And so they decided to cover up for Mark Dreyfus as well, just to make out that she's just getting rid of all her legal team all the time, and so, Mark Dreyfus actually withdrew from the case, and that was the centre of my complaint at the Victorian Bar Ethics Committee. So the Supreme Court judges were actually, covering up. There were 3 points of cover-up. 1, cover up the medical board fraud and malicious intent. Secondly, cover up the administrative errors of the medical board, which proved that the case was unlawful from the start, that I had won the case before it went to court based on administrative errors. Thirdly, to cover up for Mark Dreyfus's conduct, which is right.
Yeah, and it's
so
on that third point, I just wanted to comment that, reading through your chapter 4 of your book, where you talk, at length about your interaction with your legal team, etc., he kind of even did things like fudged an affidavit that, he was presenting as emanating from you, whereas he wasn't presenting your information in it.
Yes,
right?
Yes, that's right. He was actually creating a false affidavit from me, not based on the evidence. Yep, that happened. A lot of things. There's a lot of issues there that need to be addressed at some point. The Victorian Bar Ethics Committee refused to address it, and as did the Attorney General of Australia at the time, Philip Rudd, whatever his name was. Just not addressing the issues, not wanting to address them. And of course, Mark Dreyfus stopped being a QC at the time of my complaint and became Attorney General of Australia.
So he actually went beyond where he was, which again tells it kind of tells you how that network is constructed and how people are sort of helping each other climb the ladder.
My story, despite it being one story, highlights the function of a system and how they do function in a general sense. This is one story, but it's one story that actually points to a lot of truths about a system and how it operates. So after the first day of the Supreme Court hearing, I rang up a barrister, Charles Waterstreet, and I said, oh my God, my own QC is actually participating in a cover-up process. He's refusing to address the fraud and the malicious intent and the criminal conspiracy to commit fraud by the medical board and a number of doctors in relation to the meningitis patient, which was the main patient. That was the key patient, that the main complaint, as identified by the judge and the medical board, the main complaint against me was false. And so Charles Water Street said to me, I was crying, I didn't know what to do. You know, I was in a courtroom where not only the judges were against me, the QCs from the other side, my own QC decided to actually cover up this stuff, which was quite disturbing. And I asked Charles Water Street what to do, and he said, look, give Tony Morris written instructions tomorrow morning that he is to address the fraud and the malicious intent by the medical board and its witnesses and point to the evidence, or else he is to stand down and you take over the case. So I gave him written instructions in the morning. Now, Tony Morris did not want me to take on the case because I would have addressed these issues. And the QC, David Tate from the medical board, was going like this to him, not to have me do the case myself.
Yeah.
Tony Morris said, what I'll do is I'll present these to the judges. I'll state what your instructions were, which at the time was good enough for me, because what I wanted is this information to be in a public arena. So he said, my client basically wants me to state that there was fraud, that there was a criminal conspiracy to commit fraud by Dr. Karen Yen, Dr. Cooksey, Dr. Elcock, Dr. Ashley, and Dr. Neil Small. And but you know, I find nothing in the evidence to suggest this.
Oh my
and
God.
So you know, so that was good enough for me, and that put him in a really bad position, because and then the judges said, well, of course, for what reason would they conspire against you? To what end?
Oh my.
This is the judges, the Supreme Court judges. And I just thought, well, you know, I've got the information before the court. That's what I wanted.
You
so I can
aired it
appeal.
at any rate. You brought it out. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can appeal again to a higher court and get this solved. That my own
Right.
solicitor was covering up this. So my book is in detailed the detailed account of what happened with Tony Morris during the two-day court hearing. The transcript is in the book of what was said between the judges, me, whatever, etc. And what is most important about my book is it verifies that there was no meningitis patient, that the medical records of this patient were totally falsified. I did not perform a lumbar puncture. When another doctor performed a lumbar puncture, the results came back to exclude acute bacterial meningitis. The blood cultures of the patient that I took were negative, excluded bacterial meningitis. The clinical picture of the patient excluded bacterial meningitis. He had no fever. His white cell count was normal. He had no neurological signs. I observed him for 4 hours and he was fine. Didn't even have a fever. So where this acute bacterial meningitis patient came from, well, it was from a malicious lady doctor called Dr. Karen Yen from the medical board. Now, all I want to say is that I appealed to the High Court of Australia. I did the document myself. By that stage, I had lost faith in solicitors. There was no point, you know, and I had realized that I was capable of doing it myself. So I had realized I was capable of doing the case myself. So I basically did a document to the High Court stating it was in the public interest to address this case. There was something like 15 errors of law presented to the High Court. They obstructed it from being heard. They said, we are not giving you leave to appeal to hear the case, full stop. So it was basically blocked there. I wrote to the Chief of Justice asking for a judicial review based on all the errors of law and etc. that is available. This document is available for anyone to see. It was presented to the Chief of Justice. He said, I'm not going to reply. So, yes.
How did he say that? Did he send you a memo or tell you on the phone or tell you to your face?
No, I had a doctor friend ring him up and state, you know, it's been months since this complaint has been made. Can we have a formal response? And he said to this doctor friend of mine, Dr. Leong NG, that I will not reply to this. So I guess I'm in a position now where I need to find a lawyer in Australia. Since then, last year, there were two Senate inquiries in relation to the medical board bullying and corruption that were conducted. I've got the here, actually. I'm not allowed to talk about them, but the one Senate inquiry into medical complaints regime, so there were 2 Senate inquiries. Now, I actually admitted all this evidence, including a copy of my book, and including David Donovan's, from Independent Australia, who actually wrote 3 articles about my case, but refused to talk about certain issues, but talked about the meningitis patient and etc.
Okay.
And he did call the medical and legal fraternity extremely corrupt in these in his reports. You can all find them on Independent Australia.
Okay.
Independent Australia by David Donovan. He was a lawyer and became an independent journalist and runs this paper. So he read my book and was like totally, you know, he said, look, he said he really admires the fact that I support everything I say based on facts. And so he decided to write 3 articles on my case.
That's brilliant.
I was also mentioned in David Donovan's Independent Australia false psychological imprisonment article as well. So my case is an example of false psychological imprisonment, because they do imprison your life when they take away all your human rights and demean you and fabrications against you. So anyway, that is the formal aspect of my case, and of course there's an informal part. Now I'll talk about the Senate inquiries just quickly. I submitted all this evidence to the Senate inquiries, black and white, beyond reasonable doubt, criminality by the medical board. They accepted my inquiries as relevant, filed them, made them confidential out of the public arena for 30 years. And I was given an order not to mention them or give them to anyone, or make my inquiries, the documents, available to anyone. So that was the Senate inquiry.
Even possible? I mean, how is it legal to do something?
Well, I think it's called a gagging order, to tell you the truth.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah.
I think they're federal Senate inquiries, so it was on a federal matter. The senators, including Nick Xenophon MP, failed to exercise their powers as senators of an inquiry, failed to adhere to the Australian Constitution, failed to refer my matter to the federal police, and failed to apply the law, and failed to expose it as well. So in reality, it was a perversion to the course of justice as well, and failed to make it available to the public. So yes, so that's what happened there. Now, and just to add towards the end, you know, apart from this formal process of being attacked by the system, which I can prove, I can actually prove I am a targeted individual, and I was targeted. I can prove that, and you know, I can prove that before a court of law. And of course, there's a lot of damages associated with what they've done to me. And the Australian government and the Australian system are still trying to obstruct and cover up the truth of my matter to prevent me from obtaining my human rights to the law and justice. I had approached a lawyer to help me with a Senate inquiry submission, which was very particular and legal. And he said to me, helping you is going against the system, so I cannot help you. There appears to be a bar coming directly from, like, you know, coming directly from my enemies, which are the, you know, the Zionist, Illuminati, Satanic Cult, and high-degree Freemasons that operate within the system, banning banning all lawyers from taking on my case and threatening them. So that's where I'm at the moment. I'm actually, you know, really need a lawyer to actually help me resolve this issue. They have financially stripped me of all my finances through the illegal court process. They have, you know, stripped me of my identity, taken away my human rights to the law of justice, prevented me from living my life, you know, the way I had planned it. And that, you know, and I'd like to state that apart from this formal process, there's an informal stalking, harassment, defamation process that was going on the whole time. Calling me mad, calling me paranoid, going around saying I'm bipolar, going around saying I'm schizophrenic. Now, there's never been any evidence of this in any psychiatric report. Going on to say I'm a bad person. They have actually approached people in my realm. For example, a particular cousin of mine who, you know, has a very particular low IQ, and she failed high school, and she has also an autistic boy. this particular cousin of mine was approached and told to aid in a defamation process against me.
Oh, heavens.
We're talking about them, and the government's actually given her a lot of favours in doing that. I had approached the Greek church for help, and they were in two minds about helping me. And so they used that cousin of mine to actually state nasty things about me, to actually make sure that the church doesn't help, because that's an institution that is quite powerful. And if they'd helped me, then I would have resolved the situation. So they've been, they've basically, intelligence agencies have approached people like her. She's thinking she's important now. She's doing something important, getting favours from the government for her autistic boy and her daughter, jobs, government jobs, things like that. And also payouts as well, money.
And that's how they're doing it all around the world. This is the New World Order, because this is the exact, formula in action everywhere, even in the US. This is how they are helping neighbors renovate their houses, put their kids through college, send them to Hawaii on holidays, etc., just so they can target and defame somebody in the neighborhood.
That's right. She's received a number of free trips and jobs for her daughter, and government jobs and things like that. Yeah, so it comes back to the point. Yeah. It comes back to the point where what they're doing, this New World Order, is they're destroying intelligent people and punishing them, and promoting people with very low IQs and giving them power.
Exactly.
So this is how they're changing the system around, And another cousin of mine who I haven't seen for 30 years, but of course she was approached, and she aided in a defamation process against me as well. And this particular cousin didn't get through Year 9 school, not even Year 9. So once again, very low educated, low IQs, and then she was offered a government job.
Mm-hmm. But they're also turning people in families against each other doing this kind of thing. Imagine, the absolute cheek, the arrogance of approaching somebody in your family and turning them against you, And
well, they do that. I think a lot of people are actually manipulatable. If you have the intelligence agencies coming up and stating, your sister's paranoid, your sister's bipolar, your sister's got lack of insight, your sister's schizophrenic, your sister's got a personality defect. That's another thing that the district court judge made in his judgment. He said that she is highly intelligent and complex. She is up herself. She has a personality defect. Now, a judge to come out with a psychiatric diagnosis, for God's sake, is that acting above his powers? I would say yes. Now that was an error of law as well,
Yeah.
That was made. That was another error of law that was presented to the higher courts, which was ignored. They have turned total communities against me. They have basically approached people. They have aided in defamation process. I do have the Jewish community against me here in Australia because of Mark Dreyfus. They're trying to cover up for him just in case something, gets to the surface and is revealed.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have a lot of people against me. Now, they have given a lot of people, I believe the Illuminati have bribed judges, have bribed solicitors, have bribed my own QCs, and have also bribed members of the public as well, that are involved in also members that are involved in decision making in relation to my case have been bribed, and I wouldn't be surprised if they bribed the senators as well to cover this up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what they do, how they.
It seems like this is how they operate. They've got this network going. They're engaging in absolute fraud and criminality. They're doing exactly what they please. They just take a dislike to somebody. They don't want somebody to come up in the world, come up in society. They send people to, tear up notes that they take at during their schooling degree, and then they fabricate stories about bad diagnoses and bad judgments. They get a psychiatrist to say that you suffer from lack of insight, even though you've gotten rave reviews from various doctors and psychiatrists who've assessed you. And then they literally stop you from graduating completely as a doctor. They stop you from being registered and stop you from practicing.
Well, I was registered as a doctor, but I was trying to get the psychiatric conditions off my registration.
Right.
That's what my application was about, and instead the medical board barred me from the profession. That one fraudulent thing that the judges did they tried to even change what was appealed in the first place, because the medical board had barred me from the profession.
Yes,
You
that's
know,
what I
those,
was talking about actually, that they had barred you from the profession. How could they do that?
so I appealed a decision against that. Now, the judges didn't want me to appeal a decision against that because, and so the Supreme Court judges started changing around what the medical board decision was that was appealed. Because, I'll tell you why, because if you are struck off from the profession, it is a grave situation. A lot of gravity is associated with it. Which means the standard of proof that needs to be applied to your case is not the civil. It is the brigandshaw, which is close to the criminal, which is beyond reasonable doubt. The evidence has to be beyond, almost beyond reasonable doubt that this has occurred for her to be struck off. So the judges decided, my God, even though the district court judge said the brigandshaw standard applies to this case, as it does with every other medical case, because of the gravity of the situation, the Supreme Court judges said there was no gravity associated with the situation because, you know, she wasn't struck off.
Oh my.
And this is the judges actually falsifying the actual decision by the medical board that I appealed. Can you imagine this sort of conspiracy going on? This criminal conspiracy of our own judges and lawyers? Look, I mean, it is just absolutely tragic. I've suffered severe post-traumatic stress from all of this. I can't sleep at night. I have nightmares. Very depressed at very depressed at the moment, and I have been ever since. You know, the level of corruption basically is astounding. It takes away your safety. You don't feel safe in a society where you're not protected by the law, and people can just go around doing it.
It attempts to take away your entire selfhood, your sense of identity, your sense of who you are, because you know you've gone to medical school, you have your degree behind you, you've been practicing, you've been working as an intern, and then all of a sudden you're barred from the profession. Oh, and I wanted to ask you.
Above an intern, I was actually working as a registrar as well.
Oh, and as a registrar,
also,
as a second year doctor.
Yes, and I had also done 3 years of anaesthetics in Europe. So
yes, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. So in between, you kind of left Australia, you went to Greece, and you worked in Greece, and you had experiences there as well. And you made some comments recently about the level of corruption there not being as high as in Australia.
Well, yes, I guess what I want to say is, you know, I was a targeted individual. I had no idea that these things, I had no idea what really was going on. You know, I knew I was targeted by the government, but didn't know it was the intelligence agencies. Didn't know there was a whole intelligence agencies. They're all very connected throughout the West.
Yeah.
I'm unaware of these things. I decided to go to Greece for a holiday. My sister paid for it, and she said, "You need a break from all of this." This is after the High Court decision, which totally destroyed me. You know, I had faith that the High Court would correct these law and do what they. I mean, if the judges are not doing what they have to do legally, I mean, and it's like going to
there are 15 errors of law, and we're not going to tell you what they are.
It's like going to a doctor stating, you know, I need this therapy, and then refusing to give it to you, and instead trying to harm you. I mean, it's similar. Yeah. I mean, one thing I said to the judge, you know, Your Honour, you have placed me in this situation to defend myself. And I'm not a lawyer. And he said, yes, it's just like me doing surgery on myself tomorrow. So he had actually basically acknowledged the total bizarre behaviour and ridiculous.
Acknowledged, but wouldn't roll it back, wouldn't change it.
That's in the transcript, so I'm not making that up. It's in the transcript.
Yeah,
I did see. Yeah, so, yeah, look, I mean, I was just devastated at the end of the High Court decision. And, you know, I was being forced. People are telling me write a book and mention all this stuff in the book. So I went to Greece and I stayed on an island in Greece where I was writing the book, basically. I couldn't write it here in Australia because I was so traumatized by the situation. Every time I thought about it, I was getting, you know, post-traumatic stress effects, and I was depressed.
Yes, really.
I just couldn't face it at all. So I went to Greece, and somehow there I was able to put a pen to paper and, you know, write this stuff. So I read the book and
brilliant.
And decided, you know what, I didn't want to go back to Australia. I thought, oh my God, I can't go back. I was, you know, don't forget, my situation is very much a part of being psychologically imprisoned. You're imprisoned. You're not allowed to live your life. You're not allowed to have an identity. You're not allowed to have finances. You're not allowed to have a social network. All my doctor friends dumped me on the day of the hearing, and they were approached. Friends that I had over a 30-year period, one particular female doctor that we grew up together from 12 years of age, went to Coro Anglican girls' school together. I had supported her in so many different ways over the years. She had to make a decision, and she made the decision that she's going to be on the side of the system, not me, because she's a doctor and she needs to practice, and she has children that need to operate in the system. So on some level, but then they used her against me as well. She wrote a character reference that was before the court. I've known Helen Tsigounis all my life. She is honest, she is capable, she's high intelligence, she is blah, blah. Wrote a very good character reference. And it was presented before the court in evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, after that, she must have been approached because she basically turned on me after a 30-year friendship. And we were like sisters. It wasn't just a friendship, it was beyond that. I had even christened her daughter, you know.
Oh, wow. You were
Yeah.
very close.
And so,
mm-hmm.
yeah, so she basically had to make that decision,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to either, and this is what they do. They break all your supports, and you know, she was an emotional support for me.
Exactly what everybody targeted is reporting. Yeah.
Right. So they try and just get into your life and break all the bonds
Mm-hmm.
that you have with people, so you can be left with no support at all, emotional support,
Mm-hmm.
human support,
Mm-hmm.
human friendship. And this is a way that they use to actually weaken you as a person, so you cannot fight back.
And
They
this is
try
what
and
they are doing.
everything.
They're doing this to multiple people. And as you said earlier, Helen, these are the people who are the smartest, the brightest, the bravest, the most outspoken, the most courageous, the most excelling at their various fields and professions, people who stand out for one reason or the other, and who cross paths with somebody who is possibly a Freemason or a Satanist or one of these secret society occultists who, you know, bring their little network of thugs to bear on the issue and start ostracizing and marginalizing and literally excommunicating people from society in this fashion.
Yes. Well, that's what they've done to me, and I'm living a terrible life at the moment. You know, I've had to go back and live with my parents, and I'm 50 years old. You know, I've been fighting this since 19. I've been blacklisted for over 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
They've been at me, and these people are you know, are nasty. I've come face to face with evil, and you know what? I came from a very beautiful, traditional, loving, Christian-based family. But this sort of behavior was never even thought of, that people can be so degenerate and behave in such disgusting ways,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And
No,
these people are.
It's a plague. They are a plague in our society and on our world. They have taken over and they are doing this to multiple people around the world. And you know, we're living right now in a time period where
Now,
the intelligence agencies have such power.
yes, I'd like to state what was written in my book, at the back of my book,
Yeah.
which this book was published 10 years ago. So I had no idea that these networks existed. But I mean, you know, I had some idea eventually, but, you know, not to the level of insight that I have now. I had written, targeted by a satanic network, malice, false complaints, corrupt judges, gross violations to the laws, and cover-ups to the highest level. The unfolding events in all their detail, their complexity, and their deepest meanings penetrate to the final and general truth. So this story, my story, shines light on the network that controls the Australian systems and the crimes that remain lurking in the shadows. Now, I guess my case is a big perversion to the course of justice in Australian history, and it's a huge crime. And I'm trying to obtain a barrister that is brave enough to actually conduct the case and get me some form of justice. It's the only thing that I have left in my life. I've been working for justice for over 25 years, trying to salvage my career, my life, and then being confronted, not protected by the law. And I feel very, very vulnerable to the point where these people can do anything they want to me and the law will not protect you. So in other words, I'm an open victim where anyone can commit any crime. The intelligence agencies have said any crime against her will be covered up by the system. And they have committed multiple crimes against me, as I've discussed, which are proven in my book. And, you know, what's to stop them from killing me tomorrow, sending off some MK Ultra Illuminati psychopath to actually murder me? And there have been attempts on my life. And that's all I'm going to say. There have been attempts, and the orders are coming from that particular network, unfortunately.
Yes, I'm very sorry to hear this, but you know, this is the exact story that I hear from others who are being targeted by these vile networks. Exactly the same thing. And the question you raise is a very good one. What's to stop you from being killed? Because literally these guys don't stop at anything. They are going
So they
after people's lives and the utter ruination of people's lives.
What I've been told is what has protected me so far is the fact that I've written the book. And that is something they didn't want out there, because it is actually, you know, it's in the public domain and people have read it and know exactly what's going on. And they're not falling into the trap where they're believing what the government is actually saying about me and making things up, which in the past people were believing the government. You know, she's this, she's that, she's blah, blah, you know, whatever sort of information they could use against me, they have, and if they don't have it, they'll make it up. Or they will pay people to make it up, like that cousin of mine, to actually defame me to the Greek church, so the Greek church won't help me. And she's been getting favours by the government. Well, and when I say government, I mean the Masonic network, you know, the which is beyond the, which is really beyond the government. This Illuminati network actually controls the intelligence agencies. They are part of the intelligence agencies. That together they are the deep state. And, you know, in the end, I was actually blacklisted to the deep state, which is run by the Illuminati. Whether you want to call it a New World Order blacklisting or intelligence agency blacklisting, it's the same thing. You're blacklisted to this network of people. And these people have abused taxpayers' money. You know, they have been stalking me. The medical Board of Queensland spent millions of dollars paying solicitors to witch hunt me over a 1-year period and interview absolutely everyone. The most bizarre thing of the complaints was a Dr. Neil Small, who basically signed an affidavit stating Helen Tsigounis has not improved during her time here and has not reached an appropriate level of standard. He gave evidence against me based on that document. When I cross-examined him, I said, have I ever worked with you? No. Have I ever seen you? No. Were you on holidays when I worked in the emergency department? Yes. So he wasn't even in the hospital, and they used this person.
Astounding. Yeah, I did read that bit about Dr. Small, not even being there, but stepping forward to complete.
Well, I think what they did is, yes, they got a number of these Masonic doctors who are loyal to the New World Order to actually participate in this conspiracy to commit fraud against me, and were told that they will be absolutely protected because we run the system. And so far they have been protected because, you know, once again, the Senate inquiry didn't do anything. And, you know, it was basically their function to actually refer criminal matters to the federal police or open up a royal commission or investigate, which they didn't do. Instead, just participated in what I believe is a clear cover-up of my case. Unfortunately, this sort of thing has been going on for a very long time. You know, Illuminati crimes in Australia are covered up by the system. Now, I don't know, I'm not an expert on the Illuminati or Otto, as they're called, and they're actually registered in Australia as a satanic cult. And we also have the Church of Satan here in Sydney as well. So, you know, these networks are religiously have a religious way of interpreting things,
masking themselves.
And I think there is a huge hatred for people who have Christian backgrounds. And I think another point I want to make is by them sifting out people that are not part of the satanic Masonic Illuminati New World Order,
Mm-hmm.
They are maintaining control of the system.
Oh, yes.
See, they're changing the dynamics of the system so they can stay in positions of power. That is what they're doing. And that is one of the reasons they get rid of people like me, because, you know, there are many reasons, but, you know, one of the things, what they want to do is maintain the power in the system, that the system is theirs. They control the system.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the reasons that they actually promote certain degenerative criminal behaviours in students. Well, they're great. They're willing to act criminally, for, you know, based on our orders, so they're going to be promoted. And so there is a reversal of things. Good behaviours are actually punished. Good people are punished. And bad people, criminal-minded people, degenerate people. I mean, of course, if you know, there's a student who's you know, a potential paedophile, he will be promoted without having to you know. And I've seen cases where a homosexual in my year had actually had an affair with one of the head homosexuals in the department, and his career just, that they opened doors for his career right through. So yeah. And I think it goes back to the Illuminati agendas, you know, and the Zionism and what they're trying to do to society and how they're trying to mold it in accordance to their satanic New World Order, which is not going to happen.
No, which is not going to happen. And I was going to say, you know, I think obviously what's happened in your case is such injustice and criminality of such magnitude that it's horrendous. You know, it's you can't even look beyond it, because literally your medical career has been destroyed by these people. And from speaking with you, Helen, and reading your book, I mean, I don't know how anyone could come away thinking of you as anything less than absolutely brilliant and absolutely competent and absolutely compassionate, and you would have made a fantastic doctor. You know, all of these years you could have practiced and helped so many people. So it's such an inversion of what's right and what's just, to see that this has happened to you, that this has been done to you by this corrupt network.
I think it's done to a lot of people. Yes, I think a lot of other victims as well. You know, a lot of victims, basically, when they do get dumped by their solicitor on the first day of the hearing, and it's a common occurrence as a way to sabotage these cases, from these medical board cases, from actually reaching the courts and into the public domain. That's one way of sabotaging. They get your solicitor to withdraw from the case at particular points, you know, so that the case cannot go forward. And I think the significance of my case is that I pushed the case forward, despite all the barriers and the solicitors behaving wrongly. I just took on from where they left off and decided that I can do it myself, and did.
And you did.
And I did get.
And you showed them, you know, they were trying to traumatize you, in a sense, sort of monarch you right there, right? Stop you in your tracks, but you didn't let them stop you. You just went right ahead. So that's an incredible kind of victory, really.
Another thing that comes to mind is these people have an inherent hatred for normal people.
Apparently so, judging from their actions.
Yes, for people who have normal human emotions, normal empathy, normal compassion. It appears that these people are MK altered, just, you know, all their life, and just not normal people. They're psychopaths, and you know, they kind of hate people who've had normal, happy, you know, childhoods and normal existence.
Like that. Possibly.
And they almost hate happy people, and I think I mean, I believe these people are victims themselves of a system.
That's what many people say, that they themselves have been, as you say, MK Ultra and monarchs when very young. They do it to their own kids, right? They monarch their own kids.
They do.
It's sort of this way of life they're born into a bit.
Don't know whether to pity them or hate them, you know. I'm actually neutral. I present the facts, and you know, I hated them for a long time because they destroyed my life. And greater insight that I've obtained is to actually, they're very weak individuals. Now, the final thing I want to say was the destruction of my personal life. And I have to, because it's in the final chapter of my book, and I have to mention it, Romola. Because
no, go right ahead. As I said, you know, anything you want to talk about is fine. I
I'm not
don't
going to
want to
mention.
pressure you in any way at all.
No, I'm not pressured, and I'm not going to go into the details, but I'm just going to state that basically what they do, if you are in a relationship, like I was with a French journalist at the beginning of the court hearing, they will try and destroy it in any way they can. So you can be alone. So that they do not want
Oh,
people with
right. Yeah,
partners.
they want to target people
They
who
want
are
to be
alone.
alone. Now, they had gone to a point where they had hired an Illuminati here in Victoria to actually approach and seduce me and get into a relationship with me in order to destroy my relationship with my French journalist
Mhm.
and to actually give them information. And I think it was even more sinister than that. When I was with him, he was getting phone calls. That's how I put it all together by
Mm.
you know, he was meant to actually observe me, but in the end it worked in the reverse because I observed him and realized he was trauma-based mind control. He couldn't sleep at night. There was a personality disorder which I had initially put down to psychopathic, but then I thought borderline. I had no idea of MK Ultra existing. Then I realized he was part of the same network that had attacked him when Professor Robert Adler from the medical board, psychiatrist, chief child psychiatrist in Melbourne, who had placed the conditions on my registration, was a friend of his. And I thought, how could this guy, who's not a doctor, be affiliated with the other one? And Professor Rob, they were calling him in the middle of the night, ordering him to do things to me,
Oh, wow.
um, damage me or whatever. And he was saying I can't do it. He was telling them I can't do it. And when I realized what was going on, I was out of there. You know,
That's
I ran out of
incredible.
there.
You see that you're
But
kind
yeah,
of demonstrating the extent to which this network will go, you know?
well, I could never, I was so horrified and shocked that someone could prostitute themselves out like that, because that's what these people
That's
are. I
essentially
mean,
what it
and
is.
have a go and have a relationship with someone in order to feed back information, try and harm them, trying to obstruct the case. It was all the beginning of the court hearings. Now, what the Illuminati did not want was my case to be heard through the court system.
They
They
wanted to
fought
stop
very
it getting to
hard.
the court system because that's public record, that's bringing it out into the open. And that led ultimately to your book, which is also, you know, another form of disclosure, but literally the book was based on the court case.
I
So
was um I was threatened while I was writing the book while I was in Greece in Corfu. This English person came up to me and said, "If you continue, if you write the book," he said, "you'll have the same fate as Princess Diana." And I thought, what's she got to do with me? What's one got to do with the other? Do you know what I mean? I laughed. I didn't take it seriously, but you know, looking
that's
into
very
things,
interesting. That
yeah,
sounds like an outright threat. And
he must have
also
been
a
an
confession as to what happened to Princess Diana, which I think many of us know, right?
Look, I mean, I didn't take it seriously, but he might have been an intelligence agent because I was followed. When I went to Greece, I was actually, oh my God, what went on there was just tragic, even worse than what, you know, went on in Australia, but there were some positive outcomes as well. The Greek culture, although you do get these Freemasons who were alerted and instructed to surveil and gang stalk and obstruct me in every way possible, although they were charged up to do this, there was also a level of society that was actually very good, that was aware of what was going on. And the balance there was the good
The
people seemed
good
to have more power
people
than the
with some
bad.
basic humanity.
So, you know, in the end, they were harassing me and putting holes in the tires of my car when I was working, and, you know, and these people defaming me and people I didn't know, Freemasons coming out stating all sorts of things about me. Despite that going on behind the scenes, they were too scared to actually take it to the next level of destroying my career there. And they had attempted a few times and they got very scared to actually come out with false complaints.
Hmm.
So it appears that the people in Greece, you know, the legal fraternity there, or the system, the judiciary, is still functioning on some level because people are fearing it.
I
Whereas
see.
in Australia, I think the fear has just totally been obliterated from these people. They don't feel fear. They can commit any act and the judges will support them and cover up for them. So it goes back to the legal system, which is a very important system that needs to be functioning in a society. to actually control people's behaviours and malicious criminal attacks like they have on me.
Because the court
You
system
know,
is the place that you go to find justice, to try to remedy some wrong that's been done to you in society. And if the court system doesn't work, then that society is not working at all, right? And
so,
that's kind of
so
what you discovered.
that's what's happened in my case. I have been left without protection, left to be targeted by these satanic cults. We know that they're very dangerous and they're capable of anything. I think we know that. They have no empathy. They're psychopaths. They're child molesters. I mean, if someone, I can't go into the child aspect of it, but there has been a lot of literature stating that they satanically ritually abuse children and kill them and use them in child pornography and snuff movies and actually take pleasure in that. So we're talking about people that really are not human, as we know.
No, this is pedosadism of an extreme degree.
Well, as I said, I'm not an expert on that, and I haven't researched it very much. But I have read some information that's available on the internet, and being a victim to these people is a very scary thing, especially when there's no protection for you. And I did see an interview not long ago by a particular person from a targeted individual from, I think it was the United States, and I can't remember his name, but the video disappeared once I started downloading it.
Oh, really?
So it was very important. One thing he said, he was a highly educated, targeted individual, and he said, when you are targeted, like we all are, the intelligence agencies has put out an order to murder you, basically. They start murdering your identity, your social life, your finances, your human rights. They go through all that process with intent to actually murder you, to actually push you into some sort of suicide, or with the things they do to you, or then basically outright murder you with supposedly suicide, which I've never been suicidal. If I ever suicide, it's not me suiciding, but and so they can get anyone to do it, and they have given orders that if it's done, it will be covered up by the system. So that's where it gets really bad. So that gives any loony out there wanting to make money from these networks, which are actually quite financially powerful. In Australia, the Illuminati families here are the most well-known, richest families in Australia. So, you wonder how they made their money, but that's another issue in itself. And a lot of these families actually pretend to be Christians or Catholics on the outside.
Great.
Yeah.
They have this public facade.
Yes, they have very good cover-ups, and of course they do, because they are intelligent people. And one thing I have noted is that they are very intelligent people. And this MK Ultra Illuminati that basically I had a relationship with without knowing, that they had actually pushed towards me, was actually, very traumatized without knowing any of this stuff. At the time, it was 2003. I had no idea the existence of the Illuminati. I'd actually asked him if he had been sexually abused as a child. And it's funny that my mind went there immediately to actually understand.
That's the whole MK Ultra phenomenon, right?
Well, I had no idea that these things happen, the MK Ultra. But what I have, you read some of the children I have followed during the period that I was writing my book. I had followed the newspapers and looked for an Achilles heel, because I was pretty sure that they were covering something really bad up to actually have attacked me to the extent that they have, and feel threatened of me to the extent that they have. And, I came across a number of children, that, supposedly certain things are happening in the background that we are unaware of as functioning on the surface of society. I mean, there seems to be a few mafias out there operating.
True. Yeah, it's probably not just one. It's probably a few networks, doing dark.
But once again, I mean, they can actually get any MK Ultra victim with their multiple personalities to actually harm you. And, they can do that. They can actually do that. And they were ordering this Illuminati person in the middle of the night to actually do things. And
my goodness.
It's described in the last chapter of my book. And he was saying that he couldn't do it. So, he didn't do it.
Yeah.
I think he was being pressured, he was crying, he was in a traumatic state, and he gave me insight into these people and their psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually quite, as I said, it's actually quite sad. You don't know whether to pity or to
Yes, and
actually hate him.
it's so commendable that he didn't do it. I mean, he stood up for himself. He said no. He stood up
Well,
for
it is. I
humanity.
think it took a lot of courage to
It's
actually.
courage, I would say,
People are brainwashed from a very young age. You know, they are brainwashed to follow orders, no
Yeah,
matter what,
yeah.
and
And
to put their emotions and to put their emotions aside and not act emotionally or with empathy and compassion. They get all that squeezed out of them as young children, you know, through the process of
yeah.
MK Ultra. That's my understanding of it. Yes.
Yes, I
So,
understand that it's that way too. And I think it's commendable that he actually stood out and said no. It's incredible.
well, I think one of the reasons he had actually got, they didn't expect him to get attached to me, and he'd actually got quite attached. And I think that's what's, you know, if he hadn't got it attached to me, he probably would have done it coldly. But I think, you know, he had developed genuine emotions towards me, and, you know, he was battling, and he would say to me, if I have to do something, it's not me doing it. Do you know what I mean? So
That's
the man,
interesting.
yeah, so
Hmm.
you know they were controlling him to actually
Yeah.
harm me, and he decided not to do it. So, which is good for me.
Yes,
God knows what
yes,
could
of
have.
course. From their
And I,
point of view, I mean, if you look at what they are doing, it's just so callous. And, I guess this is what they call human intelligence or honeypotting, right? Letting certain people cross your path in the hopes that you'll start a relationship with them. And then that way they can
well,
control you.
I mean, that is just so bizarre. That has shocked me more than anything because I've never thought of that level of
Interference and
satanic,
manipulation.
satanic. Yeah, that level of interference to actually have someone that you're having a relationship with. You know, they want to know everything about you.
Yeah,
They
it
want to
is
know how you have
satanic. That
sex.
level of
They want
control,
to
it's
know how
outrageous.
I want to know how you have sex, for God's sake. Do you know what I mean? This is
Hmm.
their level of control. They want to know everything about you.
Well, you see,
It's
these are the same people
crazy.
who are getting into people's brains currently, so they want to know everything you think as well. And it's not just
Oh,
you and me at this point in time, it's they want this about everybody on the planet, you see. And
yes, I do
that
eventually.
sort of
That's
and that pulls your story out and my story and all of our stories out into the larger space of humanity,
mhm,
because this is what they intend for all of humanity, absolute control. So I wanted
absolutely.
to say that given this scenario, I mean, first of all, your story reveals so much. It's so extraordinary. And the fact that you have at this point understood so much about how the system is working in Australia, how in fact it
Well,
was
I
kind
went
of leveled against you, you know, points gives us so much insight into what's going on, not just in Australia, but elsewhere as well, because I'm sure the same system is exactly what's operative elsewhere.
I think there is a danger to it, to society at the moment, the way that the systems are controlled and run and the people who control them.
Hmm.
And I think we're all at risk in the end. You know, what if you're targeted tomorrow? What if some Freemason doesn't like the color of your hair or the skirt that you're wearing?
Hmm.
What if you feel threatened of your femininity because he happens to be a Freemasonic pedophile? Or, you know,
Hmm.
there's pedophiles everywhere, but
Hmm.
there might be more in the Freemasons. Who knows? I'm not an expert on that. Yes, I'm not an expert on that, but I know I've been attacked viciously and with a lot of hatred from people I don't know,
Hmm.
from people I do know.
Yes,
So there was, you know,
and your story kind of underlines that all of us, as humanity, sort of listening to your story and kind of grappling with the horrors of it and the injustice of it, need to, in a sense, wake up to what is going on. Because if we don't wake up to what's going on, we don't see that this is something, sort of fundamentally wrong here in our society, then we're not going to make a change to change it. We're not going to step forward to make a change. And we desperately need to make a change. We need to work collectively and communally in all of our different fields and capacities to come forward to make a change, because this is atrocious injustice. It should not be happening. This is not even human. It's not human
well,
what
you
we're
don't.
doing.
I think one of the things, the New World Order is trying to do is, they are a traitor to Australian democracy and democracy all over the world. And my case, more than in its simplest form, actually reveals a failure of a democratic process, which is very scary. We all want to live in a society in which we feel safe and we are protected by the law, and the law functions and medicine functions, and one thing I've noted being a targeted individual is they actually approach me into doctor's surgery. I've been followed into doctor's surgery where 2 years ago I had a pap smear and, you know, I was followed by these men into the doctor's surgery. I don't know what happened to what they said to her.
Unbelievable.
I don't know what they said to her, but my pap smear disappeared.
Oh, dear.
And when I rang her up for the results, she said, I don't know where it went. So, you know, uh, they are, you know, unfortunately, they do have control over doctors as well. They have their own doctors that work for them, and
Yes,
that is very scary.
that is
Scary.
scary. And actually, I'd love to have you on another podcast soon, Helen, where we talk about the medical side of things and your understanding of how doctors are involved and doctors are controlled. Because, you know, doctors are so much a part of the sort of the authoritarian superstructure in our society. And we need to kind of, you know, look closely at all aspects, I think, of what's going on here. For instance, psychiatrists, you know, are set up as authoritarian power figures in our society, and I think you came up against that as well. So definitely something to continue talking about as we move on. I wanted,
Yeah.
I wanted.
Yes, I was totally. Yes. I'll
Sorry,
go. I was totally.
we have an audio delay, I think. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was totally, as a doctor, you know, going through the system, I expected the medical system to function with a level of ethics and morality.
Yeah.
But you know, after I found out that they're using psychiatry for political purposes and political persecution of people, well, that just like totally traumatized me to the core, you know. How could a doctor do that? How could they actually sell their inner soul and behave criminally like that? It just defeats the purpose of being a doctor, really. Why would you want to be a doctor if you were a criminal like that? Why would you choose the medical profession, you know?
Good question.
You know, it totally traumatized me. Of course, I've been traumatized. I mean, that was just the beginning of things. I mean, the actual criminality is so much bigger than that, you know, this little episode initially, which was so big for me, is actually, you know, a minor incident compared to everything else I've seen. You know, they are using doctors. And I have a feeling when I did psychiatry at Frankston Hospital in 1998, I did a rotation of psychiatry. One of the questions that I kept asking is, why do these schizophrenic, delusional, paranoid people have exactly the same demands from God coming to them when some of these people were not religious? So you expect if your machinery up there goes wrong, it's going to be in tune with who you are. You know, if you're a Christian, you'll be hearing God. If you're a Satanist, you'll be hearing God or the devil. If you're an atheist, you'd be getting different sort of voices based on your own psychology. Now, all these different realm of different people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different religions, atheists, we're all getting exactly the same voices. And I had asked my superior about that, and he didn't answer me. But just, you know, looking at all the work that you've done and becoming more aware of all these experimentations that are happening with electromagnetic weapons, you know, you just wonder whether a lot of these people were just victims of the intelligence agencies. And
Yes. And
another thing.
And as I said earlier, you remember that Dr. Rowney Kilter has written about this, and this is something I need to do a little bit more to bring to the fore of everyone's awareness, is that in 1952 was when the CIA started doing covert implantation of people, and they were running experiments around that time, right up into the 60s and 70s, and some of which came out, you know, as the MK Ultra discoveries of, you know, their attempts to remotely alter behaviors of people and so forth. But it was around the same time that the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Disorders, was invented, came into being, right, the very first edition. And in fact, she actually lists out this whole bunch of symptoms. You know, hearing voices, thinking you're being surveilled, thinking intelligence agencies are harassing you, hearing voices of God in your head. These specific symptoms are now connected in the DSM to paranoid delusions or schizophrenia and all that.
Absolutely. That definitely is going on. I was unaware of it when I was working as a resident in a hospital in psychiatry. But, you know, apparently psychiatry is full of MK Ultra patients, victims. And, you know, we're unaware of it because we've been told symptom 1, 2, 3, and 4 means they've got this personality disorder or are delusional. So you completely shift the blame or the cause of the symptoms,
That's right.
redirect it to
Yeah.
something else. They're born with it, they whatever, you know.
It's not
Um,
synthetic telepathy. It's not voice to skull. It's not pulsed microwaves into the back of the head. You know, it's paranoid delusions. So
well, you know,
these are the cover-up operations.
I don't want to say that every person that is a psychiatric patient is a victim. That's
Right.
not true, because there are some genuine people who are very ill, but I think there is a group of people who have been MK ultra'd and have multiple personality disorders, and there is a reason for that. You know, it's what they've been through in childhood. You know, with supposedly satanic ritual abuse and coming from satanic families, or parents are into satanic cults, or they're members of these networks. You know, there are victims like that that are coming forward now, and people are more aware that, you know, this personality disorder, dissociative personality disorder, or multiple personality disorder, which was once called, is actually a symptom of them being abused horrifically by these networks. And, you know, I would see them and I would think, oh, right, you know, symptom 1, 2, 3, 4, that's what they have. But the DSM diagnosis should not be taken literally the way it is, because, you know, I think the reason behind a lot of these diseases can be explained with maybe, supposedly, you know, illegal sort of experimentations going on with intelligence agencies like MK Ultra was in the United States, and who knows what else here. And, you know, these, another thing comes to mind is they usually, the psychiatrists have come out with a particular disease, which is false. It's called repressed memory syndrome, or false memory
False
syndrome.
memory syndrome. Yeah.
Now, in my view, that is something made up totally by
I
psychiatrists
think
to
many
cover
people
up.
share your view. It's a way of suppressing memories of child abuse, right?
Well, I think that's an obvious, you know, way psychiatry is used to actually cover up for these networks and what they do. I
Sounds
think
like,
that's just,
yeah.
that's very obvious. That's very obvious to me. You know, knowing, being a doctor and reading up on that, that is just very obvious. It's obviously a political agenda to actually discredit people who come out with child abuse allegations, and this sort of thing is used repeatedly over and over again to actually discredit people in court. So as I said, they have their own psychiatrists who pop up in court cases. False memory syndrome, none of this is true. But the child has got, like, you know, scarring in the vagina and
Oh,
huge anus and all sorts of marks on their body. Oh, no, child abuse, false memory syndrome. A child cannot make these things up. It's not in the reality of a child to actually think of satanic ritual abuse or child abuse. I mean, it's not in their world to make
no.
these things up.
Mm-mm.
They're just not mentally able to do it.
No.
They can't do it. So yes, that's where psychiatry is also used. And I just wonder whether there are a lot of Satanists in psychiatry in general, you know, basically ruling psychiatry. There is doubt about one of the main child psychiatrists here in Victoria, and there are rumours about him being, you know, controlled by these networks, being part of them.
Those are good
So
questions. It sounds entirely possible that it could very well be a field that the Satanists are indeed using, because it is, you know, psychiatry has become the sort of tool of authoritarianism in our society. It's a tool of tyranny and dictatorship. You know,
yes,
taking
you
over
wonder.
lives.
It's unfortunate because at some point in my life I wanted to be a psychiatrist, but I wouldn't have fitted in there very well. I think, you know, I would have just delved too deep into things and probably created a bit of a commotion. I mean, I am a lateral thinker, and I tend to ask a lot of questions. You know, why do all these people have exactly the same voices? It can't be. They've
You
different,
see,
you
you're
know, different.
demonstrating actual, you know, th critical thinking here as a doctor and as somebody who's done some work in psychiatry. But it appears that the psychiatrists who are, you know, fished out of closets to give targeted individuals wrongful diagnoses of paranoid delusions, those guys are just going by the book and they're going by the DSM, or they are part of the network, and they're doing this deliberately. So they're
Look,
not
from what I've
showing
seen,
any critical thinking at all.
a percentage of them on the higher levels who've got the main positions of power are complicit and a part of it.
Yeah.
Then you get the lower ones who are less intelligent, more robotic, who would never pose a threat to the system because they can never look beyond a certain distance. They're incapable. So they're the ones that are just following orders and actually brainwashed.
I think that's absolutely accurate. Yeah. Just sort of going from my own experience, and my sister's friends were psychiatrists. I don't
Yes,
think they're
yes.
doing it deliberately. They're just following the book, following orders.
Some are. Some are. The more intelligent ones that are part of these cults are actually probably are the ones that you'll find in the positions of power in the system,
Yes, that's
controlling
probably
things.
right. Yeah.
They're complicit. They're complicit.
They are
Yes.
complicit. The ones at the
So,
top. Yeah.
so it's just the issues are just enormous and
Yes.
so many. And I think one thing I want to say about my book is I've written this in the first chapter, and it says if you can hear the truth. This is something someone sent to me at the beginning of the court hearing, a very dear friend of mine who's a professor here in Melbourne. He's a very good person, highly intelligent, Professor Paddy Dwan, extremely caring, empathic doctor. Now, he was actually attacked as well, and it was stated in the Age that newspaper that he had lack of insight. That's how I contacted him in the first place. I thought, same people were attacking you, are attacking me.
Seriously,
lack of insight. That's what they.
Yeah, they have a few MOs apparently, a few formulae.
Yeah, he sent me a poem, and it says, "If you can hear the truth, then you have spoken twisted to make a trap for fools." And I think my story is one story that traps many truths. So, it actually traps the truths. Things have turned on them, and instead of them trying to create a certain effect, the effect has been turned on them. So yeah, I think, my story does give people a lot of insight into so many things and issues in relation
Yes,
to,
and I think that's a great way. And I think that's a great way to leave it, because in a sense, your story, hopefully you're bringing it forward. The fact that you've written this book and the fact that we're talking today and you're putting your story out there for the world to hear, they're all, hopefully these will create little ripple effects of change. Because what you've done is you've inverted the system on itself. You've shown the mirror, to what they are doing, and you've reported it.
It wasn't intentionally done. It wasn't intentionally done. Things just evolved that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All I did was focus on the truth, and of course there was the issue with the district court judge, where I knew he was going to do what he was going to do, and I had to work beyond that and try and create an appeal, because not all decisions can be appealed. You have to make an error of law for it to be appealed. So they were trying to stop it at the district court level. So what I was trying to do is to make my case appealable beyond this judge that was allegedly corrupt. So yeah, there have been moments where I've actually, thought about all this and tried to control the situation. But most of the times, I think truth has a way of just surfacing up eventually.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we're living in the time period of absolute surfacing and emergence of all truths, really. I mean, it's literally the time of the apocalypse of the great unveiling. I mean, all of us, we're part of this unveiling, and all of the work that we are all doing to bring these stories out and to tell our stories and to share them with the world, to be absolutely candid, and show the truth of what's going on. I think it's powerful, and I'm hoping it's powerful enough to bust through the chains that these satanic networks have in our societies.
Well, what they say, the only constant thing in life is change, and maybe maybe there is a change that is needed. And just because things have operated the way they have for hundreds of years doesn't mean that change will not happen, because it's inevitable that some stage it'll happen, because that's that's the way the natural forces in the world work. That's the way
it absolutely change will happen, and change is happening, and let's hold on to that. Look forward to that.
Despite that, I have been so traumatized by all of this. I've got post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm depressed as well. They have totally annihilated my life.
However,
the course of my life. And
you've made a great comeback, Helen. Look at that painting behind you. It's brilliant. I mean, who can paint like that?
It's therapy. It's actually therapy.
Yeah, yeah. Painting is therapy. I mean, painting is wonderful therapy, really.
I think using colours and stuff
Yes,
kind of,
color
gives me
will
a sense
totally
of
lift you. I know. I totally
life.
agree. Yeah.
I
I
think
need to get
colour,
back
and
to painting. Yeah.
another thing I do is I swim, and I think, I think swimming is
Oh,
very
you
healing
mentioned
in
that.
itself.
You mentioned scuba diving and diving
Oh,
among the
well,
reefs. Yeah.
for a long time. I haven't done it for a long time, but I think just even swimming and being in touch with water is very healing for people. And I think it's probably a primordial instinct that we have, to actually connect with water and also fire. Like a beautiful fireplace gives you a
Oh,
sense
yeah.
of
Yeah.
warmth and attachment. I think it's a primordial kind of, you know, maybe,
Attachment, being drawn.
subconscious we have. Yeah, that is a very, very healing thing. So going back to basics.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, look, I mean, I'm not in the best state of mind lately. I've been really, really, really damaged by this whole process, and it's cost me a lot actually.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can do with about my life now is to try and get justice. Try and get a solicitor who is a good person to actually help me get some justice from the system. Now, I have actually won the case legally based on the law. So
Mm-hmm.
all I need is a barrister that is willing to do a document, and
Mm-hmm.
I need some sort of justice for closure, and I will fight for justice because, this sort of thing should not happen. And I can understand, someone a long time ago at the beginning of the court cases said to me, this Paul Dillon, this criminal barrister who told me about Judge Wall. How
Mm-hmm.
did you get him? He's blah, 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 and very corrupt. And he also said about Judge Wall that female solicitors refused to actually appear before him because he thinks women should not be in the workforce. So he had this thing against women. So I got a judge like that, yes. And he said to me that even female solicitors were feeling threatened actually appearing before him because he was giving them a very hard time. So I got, the judge of the century basically.
Apparently, oh my goodness. Yeah, yeah. Well, I do hope, I wish you the very best, Helen, as you move forward and you try to look for a barrister or a solicitor to help you. I'm not going to keep those labels straight over here. We just have the word attorney, I think, in this part of the world, or lawyer. Um, but you've also argued this case on your own. Perhaps you can do it again.
No, because I mean I can do it again, but the judges will just ignore me. So if you have a high standing QC, I mean, I think the past has actually taught me a lesson that no matter how well I do in a legal sense and how good and airtight my legal argument is, they can just ignore it.
Yeah, so
What
maybe
are you
what
going to
you
do?
really, maybe what you
Just
really
like the
need is a
Prime
different
Minister
court
said, what?
system.
Well, I mean, I think what I need is a powerful, confident barrister who's probably at the end of his career and can't be basically destroyed by them, to actually feel that feel personally about
Mhm.
such a perversion to the course of justice and democracy and what Australia stands for, to actually, you know, take on my case and get me some sort of justice.
And
And
hopefully the court system will also clean up its act, and not
I think they,
prevent the
you know,
course of justice, right?
yes,
Yeah.
look, I've been told, yeah, they did this to you, but they've been killing people in the past,
Oh my
and
gosh.
and
Yeah, we do hear that.
they've been murdered and things like that.
Yeah.
My life is still at risk because the government actually owes me a lot of compensation for what they've done because they're government bodies that actually participated in the fraud. The medical board is a government body and the judiciary is a government service, or not
Yes,
a government
yes,
service.
we should get
It is a
compensation for what they have
Well,
done.
anyway, so people that actually, are going to be sued at some point is the government
Mhm.
for the perversion of the course of justice through the Senate inquiries, etc. So,
Mhm.
you can understand that my life is at risk now because, the people don't want to pay damages and they don't want to, also, get all these people that were involved in crime, that were coerced to participate criminally against me, who
Mhm.
were told they are above the law and
Mhm.
it's okay to do that to her by the intelligence agencies. these people, they don't want these people going to jail or being accountable for what they've done because they've told them
Well, they're
do
trying
it.
hard to stop it, right? But as you said, truth will out. The truth is surfacing, the truth is coming up. And, justice is also, I hope, coming up. And change is definitely, moving
I hope so because,
around
I'm
us.
50 years old now. I've been fighting. I've been a targeted individual since I was in my early 20s, and it's a very long time to
It
actually be
is a long
targeted by these
time. It's extraordinary.
harassed.
Yeah.
It has
So
taken a toll on
sorry
me.
for your experience, Helen. And
Yeah, look, it's taken a toll on me. I'm not the person I used to be. I'm not functioning the way I used to function. They have damaged some part of my mind through this process.
mhm.
Whether it's directly or indirectly, definitely indirectly, but, directly,
Mhm.
possibly,
Yeah,
um, there have been indications, but I think that's what they want to do. They want to get rid of intelligent people from the system. They feel threatened by them, especially
that's
ones that
correct.
are not part of the networks. Like Professor Patty Dewan, a very independent, naturally brilliant, naturally intelligent person. And they obviously felt threatened of him. He refused to be part of these networks. He was an empathic doctor that put patients first. They hate that,
Hmm.
putting patients first. And, they just wanted to destroy that sort of person
Yes.
from the system.
Hey,
I'm
Helen.
sure this has happened in the past as well. Sorry, you
I
can't hear me now.
No, I think I'm going to have to close our conversation because something's happening on my PC. Something's happening on my PC, and I don't want us to crash out. So,
Right.
we'll definitely revisit your subject again, your story again. I thank you so much for coming forward and telling the story.
I think I've opened up a lot of issues.
Yes,
It was so hard to address absolutely everything. There's so many issues involved here with this story that is relevant for society today and how it's run and the issues that we're all confronting in
mhm.
many different ways. I think my case is an extreme version of an attack. There are other people that have been attacked in a more kind of not as extremely as I have. And it's been limited to just destroying their career but with me they for some reason they've become very obsessed and
They
really
have.
want
I
to
think
actually
yours is a
destroy
kind of
my very essence,
yes, I think,
destroy my yeah,
yes, yours,
and that's very satanic.
it
That's very satanic.
It is, it is, and it certainly sounds to me from everything I've heard and reading your book that yours is a very special case. Yours is one of those sort of central flagship cases. And the fact that this woman comes up to you and mentions Princess Diana to you, I thought was rather singular
It was
because
it was a
literally your
match.
story stands out, internationally just as much as her story stands out. To me, certainly reading your book. So, I think you're right. I think your case is very central to our understanding, and I'm hoping that everyone who hears your story will, get a wider view of what's going on in our society today, and also will, work in their own small way to make changes in our society. I'm all about change, and I'm always hoping that, this work that we are doing together, that talking about these issues, will indeed result ultimately in positive change. So
I hope so. We can't get really any worse than what we
exactly.
have at the moment.
How could it
Right?
get
It
worse,
just
right?
it's become very degenerate in some ways. And, when institutions that are meant to protect people are actually corrupted and are not protecting people and are working for mafias,
Exactly.
well, things can become quite dangerous and you lose your sense of safety as well as a
Yes.
human being. Um,
Yes.
so, yeah, I think, I think trying to get some sort of change is a good thing.
Good thing. And on that note, let's hold that thought. And on that note, let's bid everyone a good night, and in your case, a good morning, because you're in Australia and it's the middle of the
All
morning
right.
for you.
Yeah, I've
And
been half asleep doing this interview. I've just
no,
woken up actually.
no, wonderful. Thank you so much for coming forward and for talking to me and putting
Well,
your story out
keep up
there.
the good work. I absolutely adore what you're doing. You and your Techno Crime Fighters Forum is just the most important information that is available to people in the entire world. And if people can still, rely on the mainstream media, it means that they're just idiots, brainwashed, or
I think so too.
just, I don't know how to
They haven't
describe
caught
them. I
on to
mean,
the reality of what's
they're
going on.
cruel to in order to obtain information about what is truth and what is going on, it's people like you that are revealing it, not the mainstream media. I mean, I'm shocked with the mainstream media. They actually, published all these false things about me in the Townsville Bulletin, despite the fact that they had the true information before them. So what does that tell you? It tells you that the media conspires against targeted individuals.
It does, and I think that's been proven case after case.
Yeah, so unfortunately, as targeted individuals, we have the whole system conspiring against us to actually demean us, to destroy us, to persecute us, to take away our human rights completely.
Yeah, correct.
Law and justice.
Exactly, and literally what's been created here is a new class of person in society. The modern leper, the modern untouchable, completely
Look, I mean, I think
marginalized.